Another function that I can have would be function void f, which is sort of like a, just a, I'll talk about this. You'll see a lot of void functions in your life. As you can see, main was returning an int function named f. You can recognize that this is a function because it has a set of parentheses. In compiler's world, nothing can have parentheses, only functions, okay? So if you see parentheses like this, and then the name, and then some kind of return type, compiler knows right away this is a function, okay? So intuitively, this is the look of functions. Okay, and when we have a void, it means that the function really has nothing to return. It has no errors to report. It has no values that it computes. Maybe it just prints something on the screen, okay? If it prints something on the screen, it could do it, and it doesn't have to return anything. It doesn't even know if it ever gets to the screen to get printed, but it's just the function says, do not expect any return values from this function. Okay, so this is void, means when you use function, when you see function return type and it's void. So generally speaking, void means that nothing to expect. Sometimes, since functions have placeholder for input parameters, sometimes people type in void in between those parentheses. It's exactly the same as this, okay? But typically, this is more of a C style of programming. In C++, a style of programming, that's typically not a usual choice. So the style that we're going to be using is just use empty parentheses. And whenever it's a shorter version of something, I think in my view, that would be a preferred way to go. All right. Let me give you another example of another function. I use Control-C, Control-V, right? So this function, by the way, is absolutely empty, right? It doesn't have a return statement or anything. We could say, in C world, if you read your book, printf and put s usually use. So I'll use printf, and I'll just say print string hello, like this. Okay, so we can use a new line at the end to make it look nice. And if I attempt to compile this, and by the way, let me call this other function G, which I was about to use, but just to give you something to look at. Compiler, of course, doesn't know what printf is, okay? So printf is something coded by someone else, by some other programmers, perhaps a long time ago, and it came with a compiler. But if in Java we use import statements to tell Java compiler that we want to use some component of the library, so here we use a mechanism called include, and this mechanism called include, we're going to use this, which looks like less than greater than, but this is not less than greater than, rather this is called angled brackets, okay? Just remember, angled brackets. All right, and I'll use cstdio. Okay, so you can see that immediately printf looks better. This source editor no longer is like panicking about the fact that it didn't know what printf was. What this does is that cstdio is essentially a text file defined someplace on the system where this compiler is installed, and it contains stuff. And that stuff actually contains a definition of printf. We're going to talk more about this later on, but just to convince you that it's true, you can right-click, at least in this environment, and say, open this document. And if you open it, it actually is a file that exists somewhere and it has stuff in it. Okay, so as much as we can cope with this right now, I'm just going to close it, but to let you know that this is simply a text file. Include is an extremely simple mechanism. It basically says if you have some other library with some functions already written for you, you can use include, and it better be an existing text file that contains some code. And what happens is that what happens with this, let me just kind of like highlight everything and try again maybe demonstrating it here. I'll just paste this in and try moving it down here. So what, and I'm not quite sure why, just if I resize it. Oh yes, okay, so now I can see a little more. This is good. Okay, just want to let you know what happens with this cstdio include when the compiler processes this program. So one more time, if I actually go ahead, right click and say open this document and like highlight it, Control C, and go back to this note environment, okay, and just paste it in someplace here. Let me see if I can move it to the side. Okay, let's pretend. Oops. Let's pretend that this was. Let's pretend that this was the entire thing. Okay, let me just try moving it. It basically resists moving, but there's more to it right down there, right? So this is actually right here. This is the content in this box right here, or in this section right here. This is the content of this file cstdio. So guess what happens with cstdio? It's basically almost like using essentially like this was our file right here. This is the content of our file. It's called main.cpp in our project. So what happens is that basically the content of this stdio replaces this line. Okay, so pound include is gone, it gets erased, and it gets replaced by the text that comes from this file named cstdio. Okay. Now, it also may be a little confusing that sometimes you use cstdio, and in a C book, you may see actually a different include, which is stdio.h. Okay, so there's also stdio.h. This is just the trick that C++ plays, is that for every C header, a C compiler header such as stdio.h, there's a corresponding header that looks like this, and this is just something that you sometimes encounter in programming. And so this is basically a C++. This is a C++ header for components of C library, and this is pure C style header. Typically uses like the name stdio.h. Okay, so we're going to have much more conversations in the future about the headers, about system headers, about your own headers, about using headers in your own program. and having multiple source files in our projects, and this is where we're going to start using code blocks. Just like you, I will install code blocks on this laptop that I'm using. Right now, I just use command line for open source compiler, but we will install code blocks in the future, perhaps next week, so that we can all have common platform to use. All right. So in order to use printf, we need to use one of these headers. Okay. All right. So hopefully, if I build, okay, hopefully it builds okay, doesn't give me any problems, hopefully, right? And so do you think it's going to print anything when I run this program? Yes, no, of course no, because although it prints without problems, we know that program starts in function main, and all that main does is says return 0. So basically the program may contain some executable code elsewhere, but since there is no attempt to invoke function f, it's not gonna happen. However, if I say f right there, this is the function call attempt, and it's an executable statement. Function call is an executable statement, and if I do this, and of course now I have to rebuild this, what's going to happen that main will start, it will encounter this executable statement, it will stop executing main, and instead it will find this function in memory, and it will say print and do whatever printf does to print this. So once again, if I build this, and then if I say debug, start debugging, just like that, right? So hopefully we'll see what it does. Oh, and by the way, it just exits out on me. You could see it open a little console window as it was executing and instantly got out of this. So I will use another include. cstdlib this time, and part of that cstdlib is actually a system which invokes system shell, and I can pass a command pause, and pause command is available again on multiple platforms, different operating systems, and this pause, when I build it again, should make a little stop before the window disappears. So once again, you can use debug, and you can use debugging or without debugging, whichever way you do it. So you can see it did print hello, and if I switch to my properties, what I normally do is that I enable quick edit mode on Windows so that this will allow me to copy and paste in this window. I will obviously for us update the font to make it a little bit easier for you guys to see, and even the colors. We can switch over to something like that, okay? Say blue, and so this press any key to continue is hinting on the system call executes, and as soon as I hit any key, it goes away and the application stops running.